You're listening to the Eclectrocast podcast. This is podcast number 23, featuring Owlbinos of Northfield. Sound designer and musician Stephen Gubbins, who records under the artist's name Owlbinos of Northfield, sat down with Eclectrocasts to speak about his approach to his music, his release, My Spirit Animal is a Goth Teenager, on Romeda Records, and a new remix project to be released mid-2016. Hello, welcome everybody. This is yet another installment of Eclectrocasts. This is Jeff. I'm here with Case. Hello, Case.
Hello, Jeff.
And Kim. Kim Ruger is with us. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Jeff.
Well, all three of us are here with Stephen Gubbins. Steve, you may know as his artist name, Owlbinos of Northfield. Hello, Steve. We're happy to have you.
I'm slightly disappointed you went for the Owlbinos. I was hoping for Owlbinos, but okay.
I'll chime in with the Owlbinos.
I love the Americanism of it. Hello.
Many years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I played in a large, as one of the first acts in a large open-air concert in which the Golden Earring, I don't know if you ever heard of the Golden Earring, famous Dutch band, was the main attraction. But there was also an American band, and we were arguing whether they were the Rubinos or the Rubinos. And we never found out, actually. So English is amazing, isn't it?
It is that.
So we've been having a lot of fun here at Eclectrocast listening to My Spirit Animal is a Goth Teenager. That is the Owlbinos of Northfield release on Romeda Records, and you can get it at Bandcamp site for Romeda. Is there anywhere else, Steve, where people can hear your music besides on the Romeda site on Bandcamp?
I've got a SoundCloud. I've still got a MySpace, I think, somewhere.
Oh, wow.
But no one ever uses MySpace. Pretty much on the Romeda Records, or Romeda, or however we pronounce it, Records.
Dave likes
website.
you to say Romeda, yeah.
Does he? Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, I should have spoke to him before this. Yeah, on their website, on the Bandcamp, and it can be heard on Spotify and iTunes.
I think we're all doing that blanket these days, right? As many digital and streaming kind of formats as we can get. Huh?
As much as we hate it, yes, we are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of Romeda, we had Dave Lavery on the show last year, and he spoke about Romeda, and I remember him mentioning you as well. How did you get hooked up with Dave at Romeda?
Through we both work for the same company. We both work for HMV, which is the big record chain in the UK. And a friend of mine, Chris Gillespie, went to work at the store that he works at. And he mentioned me. He then listened to my SoundCloud, got in contact with me, and surprisingly wanted to put my nonsense out there, which surprised me immensely, because I think at that point I was about to knock it on the head.
Yeah.
Until I heard something from Dave and saying that we want to put like an EP out, it was like I was thinking, this is going nowhere. Not that many people are interested. So yeah, I was about to knock it on the head, and then I heard from Dave down there in Southport, the Yorkshire coast, no, the Merseyside coast, sorry. And he said, "Yeah, we want to put a record out," which really surprised me. Just thought, at that point, I thought no one is interested in what I'm doing, So, and to some extent, they're probably still not.
But Steve, I think we all think that. We all hesitate to go out there, worrying that nobody will be interested, and then.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Luckily, we're at a time now that people can hear your stuff. I mean, if you were going back 15 years ago, if you thought and this is going nowhere. There's no outlet. There would have been no outlet
Exactly,
for it at that
yeah.
point. You know,
Yeah.
it would have been like, that's it. Let's knock it on the head. But you know, as
Absolutely.
I was about to knock it on the head, and he got in contact with me, which is. It amazes me that the amount of dedication that he puts into it and he puts into that label is just incredible.
So you were kind of saved,
you know,
right?
I was. You know.
Well,
Not in a religious sense.
no.
But
In a musical sense.
in a musical
No, but as
sense,
a metaphor,
it was saved from the
right?
musical
You were
scrap
saved,
heap.
right? I mean, for all of us, you know, like, what is it about your music that made you hesitant to think that people might not be interested in it?
Well, it's quite personal, isn't it? I mean, I've always only ever really done it for myself. He says slightly modestly, but I was doing stuff for myself in my spare time and just sticking it out on SoundCloud and getting a few people, listening. But there was like no big numbers of people listening, and I just thought, okay. And I wasn't really getting much feedback. Occasionally there'd be someone saying something nice. But, before I was doing Owlbinos, I was in other bands and things like that, and we had moderate success with like shows and things like that. But there was no offers of Owlbino shows, and there was no, I think when there's a group of people doing something, collectively you'll do something and you'll get together and you'll push it slightly further. I wasn't really pushing it, so
Was it the same style of music, your previous band, or is Owlbinos I said Owlbinos, a departure?
I try to recreate what I did in other bands in a more studio sense. Prior to Owlbinos, I'm going American now.
Catching.
Prior to Owlbinos, I was in a band called Grave Paintings with two other guys who were two brothers, and it was noise stuff. It was jammy noise stuff, sort of Sunburnt Hand of Man, Animal Collective, and we would just record what we jammed, and then we did a few shows. We played with the Boredoms, actually.
Wow.
We supported the Boredoms, which is an amazing show. Well, they were amazing. We were shit, but they were amazing. And we did, and that was what I kind of tried to recreate, that kind of jam thing, and that's kind of one of the things that I do with my music is, try and make it a bit, I don't know, not so kind of like computer music-y, if you know what I mean. I try and make it more organic. Organic is the word I was looking for.
Stephen, how what instruments did you play? What was your development as a musician? On some of your tracks, I heard what sounded like a detuned, distorted guitar. So, are you a guitar player, or?
See, no, I don't play guitar. I don't play any instrument really. I don't really see myself as a musician. I'm more of an editor. God, that sounds really pretentious. I'm more of a, I try and, put sounds together and that I like and make them interesting. I can't play an instrument. I couldn't. If someone, put some sheet music in front of me, I couldn't read it,
You're a sound designer. You're a sound sculptor or a sound designer. Yeah.
Noise structuralist.
There you go.
I like that. I think I might use that. Yeah. I mean, that was what my influences were at the, at the birth point of Owlbinos. Would like listening to Wolf Eyes and listening to Lightning Bolt and listening to, a lot of, American stuff, and, Throbbing Gristle and, just stuff that, probably non-musician stuff, really. I mean, Lightning Bolt, probably very good musicians actually saying that, but that was my entry point for that was, I think that was when I probably realised I could make music from listening to stuff like that.
So do people, and you yourself included, I mean, you work with sound, but you seem to sort of hesitate to call your work music. So what in your mind makes something music, and what is more like painting with sound or gardening with sound?
Painting's a good word to use. I was listening to George Martin talk about it this week, obviously with In Passing, and he was talking about how people just would say that music is like a photograph, and then he was saying, well, no, it's more like a painting. You know, what he tried to produce was more like a painting. So that's what, without comparing myself to the Beatles or George Martin, I would, I'd call it more kind of like painting, because I do come from an art background, so I think for me, it's all about collage of sound. God, that sounds as pretentious as it gets.
That's a good description. It is. It really is. It's a good description of your art, what you have to offer.
And the layers of material, especially when you're talking about painting. If you're talking about, an oil or something that's got a lot of texture or a lot of lift to it, when you paint, I'm explaining it to you. I'm just explaining it to the show, but. You put layer upon layer upon layer with sometimes different devices and create that depth in that way. And so, I can hear that in your music, once you describe it that way.
I think the 4 tracks that we're going to listen to today will make your point absolutely clear. In many of your tracks, there are these deep sine wave kind of sounds that almost are like, when you paint layers, they usually paint some darker layers underneath to create shadow, with the lighter colors over top. And it is almost like you do that too, Steve, like you create shadows, musical shadows, with your deeper sounds. And then, but in some of your tracks that we're listening to, it is like Kim says, like the paint is like flowing into each other. But in other tracks, the colors keep separate. And one in particular, I think it is She Always Explodes.
Well, I think that's the closest I've ever got to a dance track. Because I kind of see that as my dance track. I mean, I'd love to see someone try and dance to it. But I mean,
that's great.
I try and use rhythm, but not in a. I hate to use kind of pre-used drum sounds. I think one of the things that I try and do is try and disguise sounds so much that you wouldn't know what they were. I can't see the point personally of just using kind of lots of presets and things like that would just kind of go, that kind of put it in a certain place or a certain time. I try and use rhythmic devices. I mean, I don't use a lot of software. I don't use a lot of. I've never used a soft synth. My sound. I sample a lot. I'll sample a lot on my iPad, but it will be kind of like kitchen utensils, and it will be the sound of the dishwasher going. The incidental sound of something happening outside, or sometimes it's even just the things that, the bits that you would cut out, and I'd reuse that section. So you'd kind of go, oh, that's got a slight click in it, and I go, right, well, I'll use that click as a rhythm track.
And I can definitely hear it in that track, especially when you get towards the end. There's a real rhythmic element that comes in that to my ear sounded like it was a field recording, sounded that it was, like an ambient noise, that you did find the pattern within and then created that rhythm from it. So exactly what you're describing.
The rhythms are usually incidental rhythms, but, I'm happy with those incidents. but it's, I don't really do many field recordings. I've got the devices to do field recordings in that, but it's usually just the sound of my kitchen. The whole record is the sound. The sound of my kitchen. It's sort of steeled time between the everyday. Running a family is,
But Steve, you don't consider those recordings field recordings? Recordings in your kitchen?
I suppose they are, yeah. But I kind of see the field recordist as someone who kind of, like a rambler who goes out with a big mic boom and who goes, looking very interested at the sound of, I don't know, a bird's tweeting.
Geese,
Geese, or,
Geese.
I'd love to be one of those guys. I'd love to have the time to be one of those guys, just wandering the Brecon Beacons, recording,
Oh, the Brecon Beacons.
recording,
I've been there.
you know what I mean? I'd love to be that guy.
Oh, that is such a beautiful place.
But getting back to what you were saying before, Steve,
Sorry.
there is rhythm in your music that is musical, and it's not. I mean, it may come from kitchen utensils or whatever, but I think you do a really good job on a number of your tracks. Some of them we will listen to in the show here. Some of them that we aren't from your album that I've really enjoyed for the past week. That hint at like a melody, like a repetitive melodic figure, which is a nice contrast between a high sort of pitch and a mid to low sort of pitch. But it maintains that repetition. Mikey Scum is one of example of that sort of thing in that song, where you do have
the rhythm,
a bunch of the different tonality. Not tonality, but timbres, rather, with the high and the mids, with repetitive figures, which makes that rhythm.
It's kind of Mikey Scum. I was listening to it today because I thought I'd better listen to the record again, because I haven't listened to it since it's been released. So I listened to it again today, and I thought, God, it sounds like John Carpenter. I'm not,
it's funny you mentioned that, because I have another question about but I'll talk about it later.
Yeah, but like, and the what you're talking about in there is actually an iron. When you steam an iron, there's like it goes like that. That's the sound on there.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes. But that's my most John Carpenter. Not that I'm comparing myself to the great John Carpenter, but I'll go on. I am comparing myself to the great John Carpenter. No, I forget it.
Go for it. You're entitled.
But besides, like, for the mind and the ear, you do repetitions that are easy to follow, that are relatively short duration and keep going on and on and on. But you also do, developing rhythms, like almost more like ebb and flow kind of feel in a couple of tracks. There is, besides the sort of repetitiveness, like it may be a machine going, or like a mixer or whatever in your kitchen. But there's also this ebb and flow, almost like, of waves of the ocean, or it gives an impression of rustling leaves and this coming and going. And sometimes there are also short bursts, like almost like a fast passing car, but they are more underneath, and it requires a deeper listening, I think.
I tend to, I'll record a track, and then usually on my iPad, through relatively simple software, just usually GarageBand, and then I will record a layer, which is just me listening to it. And maybe I'll have the window open. Maybe a tumble dryer will be going, or the Hoover will be going off in the background, or the radio will be on. In that kind of Brian Eno kind of way. And yet again, I'm not comparing myself to Brian Eno. But and then I will slightly change the timing of it, so that it will either be slightly delayed or slightly come in before, so it will kind of disorientate the whole mix. I think that's where a lot of that stuff will come from.
Is that where the TV came from on UTMN IDB?
It's radio. Yeah, it's
a radio.
It's Radio 4. It's very highbrow British BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. I think it's some politician talking about taxes or something like that. But yeah, you're correct. That's exactly where that comes from. And sometimes there's even on, I forget which track it is now, that I came down really early in the morning. One of my kids was up early in the morning, and I could hear birds, because where I live in the Lickey Hills, which is quite a beautiful area. It's very, it's like a forest area. And I opened the the window, and there was lots of birds. So I just thought that's a beautiful sound. Just recorded the track being played with the kind of dawn chorus going as well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those kind of field recordings are just, as I say, in my kitchen, but they are, you know, the beautiful sound of the Lickey Hills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I mean, I don't mean to, you know, go on and on about this, but I think this idea of what is a field, right? I mean, where do sounds live? Your kitchen is your field, and that's, you know, I mean, last year I put out an album called the Laundry Tapes, and now I'm not a purist like you. I do use, you know, plugins, and I do use soft synths and those sorts of things. But it was entirely based about laundry sounds from laundry machines, entirely made with that. You know, like when you close the door of the washing machine.
Matt must done something similar to that recently, where they've just
just saw an article about
that.
I kind of like the term found sound. Sometimes I use that in exchange, you know, in exchange with field recording, because sometimes these everyday things are kind of like that. You just happen upon them.
Dave came up with, I don't know if he came up with it, but he first introduced me to soundscapes, which I think is an incredible... I was quite happy with that. I'm not happy with a lot of descriptions of what I do, but soundscapes is definitely one of them that I am. I do like that. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that.
So I would love to have a listen to, and I have to look at this UTMNIDB. Before we go take a listen to that, can you tell us what that stands for? Because
it's up to my,
or how do you pronounce it?
It's just up to my neck in domestic bliss is the.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah, I had a quick question on that track right before, because actually this kind of goes in now that I know the name of it. You know, when I was listening to it, one of the things, and I probably associate it with the album title too, you know, and the idea of a goth teenager sitting around and possibly being in the living room, hearing these mumbling voices, and then as teenagers, or, you know, those of us older than teenagers sometimes do, you know, kind of escaping from their surrounding where they are, you know, the act that, you know, you're hearing the mundane, and then all of a sudden these bell tones and these kind of ethereal other things seem to be distracting you, and you escape into that other realm, the mind kind of leaving. So did you think about that when you created the track, or is that just something I'm reading into it?
Well, the title of the album is just, I just stumbled across the title of that. That was just, I was on Instagram, and it was a t-shirt slogan. It's my spirit animal as a goth teenager is a hipster t-shirt slogan. And I just thought, that's great. I just loved that. But being an old goth, you know, not that I look it now, but that's kind of how I started listening to music. First gig I ever went to was Fields of the Nephilim, Worthing Assembly Rooms. But yeah, that's, you know, no, I'd never really thought of it in those terms, if I'm honest, Kim, sorry. But I think it. But I love the way that you've read that into it. That makes me happy, because that's what it's about, isn't it? These are, you know, the themes of the titles and themes of things for me come in later. This whole record was one track. You know, when I first started it, I wanted it to be one free-flowing track, and then it didn't quite work like that. I thought it didn't seem like it was one track. It just seemed like it was all different sections. So I kind of made up titles for them when they, you know, things that I like, sort of things that my son Howie says, like "she always explodes" is something he said. He'll get his skeleton is another thing he said, but that was kind of weird because you know, another thing, Mikey Scum Must Die is something we used to say 20 odd years ago when I used to go to rave.
Well, you hit on something in there which is interesting because on your release, you have it available as a cassette with a fantastic package, by the way. I love the artwork, and it comes in a Mylar package. When you go to your Bandcamp page, you have that cassette available, but you also have continuous mixes of your entire track, side A and side B, so that people can get, even digitally, a flavor of your original intention. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, why don't we take a listen to Up to My Neck in Domestic Bliss, where you will hear a radio and something that does sound like a tumble dryer going on. And
it is a tumble dryer.
Yep, it is. Yep. So excellent. We're with Steve. You'll know him as Owlbinos of Northfield, right? And we are going to listen to the lead-off track from his album, My Spirit Animal is a Goth Teenager. This is called UTMNIDB, or Up to My Neck in Domestic Bliss, here on Electrocasts.
Actually, we have touched on, I was curious about how Steve goes about selecting his sounds, and he turns his own kitchen into
a studio. Yeah, my kitchen is the studio, basically.
Is the studio?
I used to have a studio. In my old house before children, I had a studio. I used to love my studio, but I mean now my studio is in a box. It's actually in a shoebox, an owl shoebox, where I keep effects pedals, chaos pads, my Doctor sample, which I couldn't live without my Doctor sample. That's what I use mainly. My Yamaha Kids sampling keyboard, some Casio. I've got a Casio. I used to have an SK1, but it fused. But that's what I use. I mean, I've got a microKORG upstairs that I don't use. I've got an old analog Yamaha synth that I used to use with an old band called Haddonfield, Illinois, that I used to be in with a guy called Spencer Hickman, who now runs Deaf Waltz Records, if anyone's familiar with Deaf Waltz. No. They put out soundtracks. He used to be manager of Rough Trade in London, so he's kind of... But he's been around. He's been around. He's a bit of a Renaissance man, is Spencer. But we used to make music together. Anyway, I digress. But
I do have another question about the track we just listened to, and it probably overlaps with some of your other tracks. But the track sort of ends a bit abruptly, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It just stops basically. And I personally always find beginnings and endings of compositions the hardest thing to do. There are a couple of basic tricks, right? You can suddenly end the song on a particular poignant piece, or you can sort of let it sound out, or you can fade it away. How do you make your choices in particularly the ending of a track?
A lot of times I just use the fade option.
But not on.
I don't know.
Not on this one.
I mean, probably most notably on Cinnamon Fog, I used a loop of my kids just doing something. I can't remember what they were saying, and it was just like a quite annoying loop that I thought kind of was an interesting way to, because Cinnamon Fog's quite. I don't know if you've heard it. It's like it builds up and it's lots of textures. It's probably the most textured thing I've ever done. And I just threw in a really annoying sample at the end that kind of threw a few people, I think. So sometimes you just, I don't know, I don't really give it much thought. Because I use a lot of loops. I mean, my stuff is pretty much just continuous loops layered over continuous loops. It's not, it may not sound like that, but that's what it is. So the only way to kind of kill something like that is either keep it going and with echo, and then the echo gradually fades out. I must admit I can't remember the abrupting that quickly, that track, I must admit.
But when you build up a lot of layers of sound, one on top of the other, loops as you do, reverb and delay are not very useful tools, right? Because they will make things incomprehensible very often. So you must be using.
But I think that's fine. That's fine with me. Incomprehensible, totally fine. I'm not. That's it.
Well, that gets into something, I think Case was, when we were passing around emails, talking about what we heard in your music beforehand, that Case was talking about is that some of your sounds are very distinct. You can hear the very distinct tracks, and some of them blend together and very much merge together. And is that something that you consciously do piece by piece, or you think, I want something a little bit different on this piece, or is it just something that happens and you either like it or you don't?
Happy accidents mainly, yeah. I'll always, if I'm starting a track, I will always start off with like a drone, or mainly I've got like a favourite sort of drone, like a glass drone, like a glass with some water and just the oldest tool in the book. Record that.
Yeah. No, that.
Try and make a nice soundscape out of that. And then see what else comes about. I may get like a little analog synth out, or one of those I can't remember what they call them, like the Korg little £50 analog things that I'll just try and get some interesting sounds out. Maybe sample that, maybe put a delay, or put it through a Chaos pad. Just we'll see what interesting sounds come out, but mainly it would be, stick the iPad up. You see, because I have to record when I get a chance to record. I don't have the luxury of studio time, or the luxury of, tonight I think I'll make some music. It's not like that for me. It's like, I've got 3 kids, It's a case of, when everything else is finished, if I've got enough energy to do something, I may, and that's how a lot of these sounds, that's how they come about, because I'll be tidying up, I'll be making the kids lunches, and I may, put the grill tray back in and go, oh God, wow, the tone on that grill tray is quite amazing. and the only thing that I've got at hand to do anything with that is an iPad, and I'll just go, just use the inbuilt mic and an iPad. And
so let's move on to hugging a ghost. Is that
fun? Yeah.
Instead of a tree.
To talk about hugging a ghost. I'm very proud of hugging a ghost.
You have a lovely guest vocal on Hugging a Ghost.
That's my friend Lucy, who she's worked with Julian Cope. She's like she's too big to be on my record. She's someone I work with, and has recorded, as I say, with Julian Cope. She recorded lead vocals on a track of his. She's associated with that whole Head Heritage thing. She's in a band called Great Raven that she's doing. Very talented photographer, a good old friend of mine. And I've been in communication with her, because she doesn't live locally anymore. She lives in Nottingham now. Communication about my music and stuff, and she's always paid an interest in it. And I asked her if she wanted to do some vocals for a track I'd done, which the track I'd done, I'd finished it. I'd finished it. Well, I thought I'd finished it, and it needed something. And I sent it to her. And that's what she did. There's vocals and bells that I think she's put on that track. And I think she sent them back to me, thinking that I was going to manipulate them a bit more and do something. But it's straight. It's what she sent me, So, and I was very happy with that. It's I see it as one of the key tracks on the record.
So did you tell her what you were looking for? Or did you just say,
I sent her,
whatever you want?
She said to me, send me some lyrics, and I sent some really bizarre, pretentious records that she just said some thoughts and things like that. And I think Hugging a Ghost is one of the things that I sent, one of the lyrics that I sent her. And that was, she said that's what the album should be, but she just did a kind of Morricone-esque vocal on there. Do you know what I mean? And again, I'm not comparing myself to Morricone, but she did a wonderful kind of Italian horror soundtrack-ish kind of vocal. Well, that's what I hear in it. It's probably not what everybody else hears, but that's what I hear. So
I mean, there is some sort of a suffering in the voice, but there's also an openness and a tenderness in the voice that is very clear in moments. The title "Hugging a Ghost," and you spoke a little bit. I think it came from one of your children, you said, but I think in this particular track, it is a very appropriate title to me, because there seems to be like hugging something, so meeting something that is strange or alien. A ghost is something that, generally is considered something that we do not really want to engage with. But hugging a ghost means to sort of face the alien, the unknown. Is that in a way how, does that represent anything for you in your music?
I kind of thought it sounded like a nice concept.
Yeah.
Hugging a ghost.
Yeah.
And I think we do we all have our demons, our ghosts, and they're almost a comfort in a way. If something bad, the bad thing that happened in your life, sometimes it is the thing that determines who you are.
How you face that.
That title becomes that title's probably about that. You know what I mean? Or, and a ghost can be something that is a memory, isn't it? Or,
sure.
So it's. It's not. I don't think I overemphasized it or overthought it at the time, but when I was probably writing that sentence, that's probably what I was feeling.
So particularly with the female voice, I think it really works. That that feeling is amplified quite nicely, I would say.
Yeah, I mean it's the most different track on there, and I think it probably needed it on the record, to be honest. Because there's a similar tone and feel, of a kind of soundscapey drone stuff going into it. You know what I mean? Some of the tracks are very similar. Some of the tracks probably have the same key sort of sounds and things that I've just manipulated slightly differently. Because it goes back to the fact that it was supposed to be one piece of music, but it never worked out that way.
No, those are those underlying sine waves that are sort of coming like an ebb and a flow. They're in almost all of your tracks. Yeah,
the glass and the kind of chime and bell tones is kind of the way that I interpreted those.
There's a sound that I use a lot called Disney sprinkles, which is like one of my daughter's toys. There was like a wand. And it makes different sorts of sounds, but I sampled it and messed around with it and things like that. And a lot of things like that. A lot of my music is from broken kids' toys and what we would call car boot sale finds and things like that. So a car boot sale is like a thrift store. You know what I mean? I don't know if they have that sort of thing, like a garage sale. You know what I mean? Where you kind of
we have we have that.
that kind of thing where you go to a field and there's just everybody's crap that they've bought in their lives that they want to get rid of. The bad novelty singles that they bought, and things like that. And you just kind of occasionally you'll come across, you'll go, wow, that's where I got my Yamaha sampling keyboard from one of those things, and and I've picked up microphone. I'll pick up like crappy microphones, and I'll pick up, stuff like that because I'd rather have a lo-fi sound than a hi-fi sound. For me, I'd rather it sounded like it was produced really badly. I think it probably.
So it's found sounds and found instruments.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
Really?
I mean, there's stuff that isn't found instruments. There's stuff that like Dr. Sample, my Dr. Sample, but.
Yeah. So we're talking to Steve from Owlbinos of Northfield, and we're going to hear a track from his My Spirit Animal is a Goth Teenager album. This is called Hugging a Ghost on Electrocasts. So, Steve, I know for a fact that all these sounds are really, your attempt to recreate what you had in the SK1 when you had your Casio SK1. Because I had one too.
Well, that's the thing. I blew my Casio SK1. I remember. Have you ever heard of a band called Sightings? You know a band called Sightings? Like a New York noise band. And the guy from Sightings was so excited about my SK1 when we played with him a show in at the Medicine Bar in Brum. And that night we played, I blew it. It blew up. Because it was an American one. I bought on eBay. It was an American one I bought on eBay. And I used the wrong
voltage.
The wrong... and it just went
plug.
Yeah, the wrong voltage, and it just went.
Oh yeah.
And luckily, after that, that's when I got my. I see the Yamaha. I can't remember the model name. There's a Yamaha sampling keyboard that I use that's better than the SK1 because you can. It's got lots more things you can manipulate in it and things like that. It's got the SK1's quite a bit. It hasn't got the ability to do as much as this as the Yamaha one. I can't remember the model name. I think Dave's got one as well. But
Right. What draws you to a lo-fi approach or a lo-fi sound, or using equipment that you admit that you'd rather have lo-fi than hi-fi?
I think the stuff that I listened to growing up was to me was more lo-fi. Be it listening to Pavement on John Peel and The Fall and stuff like that. Just it's not high production value stuff. I don't. I don't think there's much point me trying to be Aphex Twin or Boards of Canada or Fortet or those because I don't. There's enough of that out there.
Yeah, I think we all feel that too. Why try to do something that's been done to its best degree?
And then there's nothing, and I'd like to say there's nothing wrong with that because I love Aphex Twin. I love Boards of Canada.
Yeah, we do too. Yeah.
I love Fortet. I'd rather. I'd rather be the shitty Brian Eno than the Brian Eno. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather just try and recreate what someone. But I'd rather recreate how well they do things than in a basic form.
When you go lo-fi, because you do record your sounds digitally, but then you go lo-fi, and by going lo-fi, you're basically removing stuff, right? So when you digitize sounds, analog, real-world sounds, we're constantly removing things.
Yeah.
Is that a concept that you're working with? This idea is kind of like looking at what's left over?
Like a sculptor, really.
Like a sculptor does, yeah.
I mean, I try and manipulate sounds to sound not as if they were originally. I try and mess around with them as much as possible through digital means. So I mean, be it effects or be it delay on an art, because I use GarageBand a hell of a lot, and in fact it's the main editing software I use. And it's such an easy it's if I can use it must be easy. And it only gives on an iPad, it gives me 8 tracks.
Yeah,
that's all. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not overcooking it. So I'm not kind of labouring away at track after track after track.
Sure.
So and there's not many effects on that. There's delay on there, and that's it. Pretty much, So mainly I'll be just using loops with delay on an iPad, and then if I want to use other effects, I will take it onto a Mac and use GarageBand again. But then it's more infinite. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's more. There's more layers, and then I don't use any of the effects on GarageBand on there. I will use effects through a Chaos Pad or through the Dr. Sample or through any other kind of effects pedals that I've got. So that's probably why it sounds a lot different to what other people are doing. Maybe I don't know if that's
Yeah, it's cool. I'm kind of interested in shifting our attention to the fourth track that you let us listen to, which is different than the other three tracks in that the sounds are more separated. And it's titled "He's Magic and You're Not."
Yeah.
And is this title coming from your children as well?
Yeah, that's what Howie said. Yeah, that's what that my youngest said. I can't remember what it was referring to. Probably just a conversation that him and my daughter were having, probably. And he was probably said it with all seriousness.
Right.
That's a great thing about kids. They'll say things, he's magic and you're not.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's an explanation then, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, that's why we have children, so they come up with great track names. That's the only reason we would have children.
Well, this is my favorite track on your album. I adore this track. I love it. I love the little percussion. I don't know if you're familiar with a group from the late 60s, and they're still around to some degree, a jazz group out of Chicago called the Art Ensemble of Chicago.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
They used a lot of what they used to call little instruments.
Right, okay.
And all the percussion is, it's very reminiscent of that avant-garde sort of approach where you're taking, and a guy named Don Cherry did the same thing, who came...
Yeah, I know Don Cherry.
Slightly out of the same... Well, he came out before, but... he would use a pocket cornet, a little cornet, and he would use a lot of these ethnic percussion sounds and things like that in some of his music in the 70s.
But would he have used a whisk like I did on this track? I don't think he would have, no. I think that's...
And the sustained tones I love, too. I love the little drone, almost melodic, harmonic sustained tones, too. Yeah.
Well, this...
So is that what your metallic sounds that you have throughout the album, but you can definitely hear it on here?
That's
so
a whisk,
is it
and
a whisk?
it's probably the clearest sound on the record, because I didn't put any effect on it.
Yeah.
This is just me over a microphone, just spinning whisks together, and I think I just looped it. Yeah, I just looped it, and it just sounded interesting. There's another track that I did. A long time ago, where I used a broken alarm clock in a similar way. But I just sometimes I think if you get like a track or a sound, and then just to put something organic over something that just is what it is over the top, like a live recording of that over the top. It just it's separate. You're right. It separates it. It separates it to and it gives it a clearer, crisper sound than probably a lot of the sounds on the record. It's it's not as muted or as distorted as anything that I usually do.
Yeah, and
that's probably why it works.
I was going to say that it's also getting back to some of those rhythmic elements that you were talking about earlier, except for in this case, it's a very random percussive element that's happening.
Yeah, it doesn't. It just two sounds that happen to work over the top of each other. They're not meant to work together. They just do. Yeah. It's one of those happy accident things. I was just this is going back to what we talked about earlier, when finding the time to do something. You instantly find the time to do something.
So let's have a listen. What do you say, you guys?
Yeah. This is called He's Magic and You're Not, from the Owlbinos of Northfield album, called My Spirit Animal is a Goth Teenager.
that was awesome. Jeff said it's his favorite track, and I have to agree. But it may have to do with our affinity, that the sounds are more separated. I guess it's something that I think your ear can penetrate easier into the music, and so you become a little bit more of a participant rather than just a listener, and I think that's always attractive. But did you say that this was your dance track, or is that She Always Explodes?
No, no.
All right.
She Always Explodes. That's the dance. That's the dance floor banger. Is She Always Explodes. That's the
We're
one
gonna ride out on that one.
That's the one that gets them all on the dance floor.
I should have remixed that one and gotten that kick in there, and done it that way.
See, I mean,
but
it's. I mean, that's. But saying, I mean, I'm moving. With what I kind of. I'm kind of moving away from kind of. The sound of Owlbinos as it is now, because I'm thinking have I taken this to the point where it can be taken. I want to do something more rhythmic, more drum-like, but using the same same elements, but to make it more kind of tribal, like something more kind of like Canada number one. Do you know what I mean? Something kind of really primal, drummy kind of thing. I'd like to do something, even like what the Boredoms do. Just something, just something completely new with it. Something completely. I may not even call it Owlbinos. Just want to move because this took so long that it kind of. I feel like I might have drawn an end to this sound. But I just want to make something rhythmic, but not like but probably manipulate it to the point where it doesn't sound like that. It probably just sounds like dirty noise. But it's. I just want to, I just want to do something different.
Rhythm is a main attraction for you in the music, whether you're using. Whether you're using synthesizers or whether you're using the found sounds. That is a very recognizable element in your music is rhythm.
It's I mean, it comes a lot of that kind of like influence with rhythm comes from kind of modern classical music like Reich and Philip Glass and Terry Riley and people like that who kind of use rhythm, but not in a not
to keep time.
Not in a drum. Well, not in a drum way, but exactly. Yeah, exactly. In that, I kind of love that kind of phasing, kind of off where it's kind of slightly off kilter, and I love that. I'd love to recreate something as good as any of those people would do.
So you in She Always Explodes, you use a sort of a flanger phaser.
Yeah. Well, that's just that was through Dr. Sample. That was just through Dr. Sample, and I just used a flanger, and I think I used some tape echo from that as well. So where it kind of goes a bit, messed up towards the end. There's some kind of tape echo where you can just really. Mess it up. But your sounds are all very sine wave based. You don't use saws, like a saw wave or block waves. You're because you use mostly analog sounds. You are very very high probability that it's like sort of this undulating feel to rhythm, right? As opposed to like a drum rhythm, which is very much like a block wave, if you will. It's on and off and on and off, dunk dunk dunk. But your music is always undulating and developing, and I think She Always Explodes is a very good example of that, because it's this sort of ebb and flow of sounds, and they're not all in the same time. So so you use rhythm actually to create a sense of time, not to keep it. Yeah, I think so, but I think that's probably down to a lot of my naivety as a non-musician. I don't. What you're saying there is not intentional by any way. I haven't. haven't intentionally done that, but it's great that I have, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know,
I mean, it's very clearly there, you know. So, but so that is inside of you, you know. That is an attraction that you have to what you do. That you.
Yeah,
that
I think I've always liked rhythm.
Yeah.
You know. I think I think I've always been attracted to rhythm from, you know, earliest days that I can remember music. You know, I've always made up kind of rhythms in my head. You know, you know, without
You know who does that? Musicians do
That's
that.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Then.
Guess what you are. Guess what you are.
No. I'm happy. I mean, it's great. I know it's great. I mean, yeah. Obviously, you know, without, you know, I think it's the first people who made music weren't musicians. Well, they didn't know they were musicians. Yes. You know, banging a rock against a bit of wood. They didn't know they were musicians. They didn't learn, you know, notes and things like that. You know, tribal music wouldn't have been learnt in that way, or do you know what I mean? So it's you're correct in those senses, in that sense, but. You know, but when I say that I'm a non-musician, I've never learned. No,
you're not trained. You're not formally educated.
Yeah, I'm a trained musician. Yeah, I couldn't. You know, if anyone ever asked me to do a cover version, I couldn't do a cover version. You know, I couldn't. Yeah.
How about musical? It's
I'm musical. Yeah, that's fine. I'm musical. That's fine. Yeah.
You know, I was going to say something just a minute ago about when you were talking about when I went to music school. I went for music composition for a couple of years right out of high school, and they sat the entire, you know, freshman student body down and taught to them, I guess, trying to give them a boost of confidence. And they're like, you know, a lot of you are asking, you know, why are you here? You know, do you deserve to be here? Are you qualified as a musician? And they gave a great speech because they said, do you count the steps when you walk up steps and make a rhythm out of it? Do you hear a train whistle and start humming a tune or humming the chord? Then you're in the right place. You're a musician, whether you know it or not, because you actually already hear it or feel it or anything like that. And I've always remembered that, you know, from decades ago.
Well, that sounds like great advice, doesn't it?
Do you remember that? And I don't know if they had that commercial in the UK, Steve, but there was a commercial by Volkswagen where they had the windshield wipers, and then eventually that turned into a track, and you know
it was a bit. It was a bit blue. What's that kind of Blue Man Band thing? You know, that kind of like that
Blue Man Group.
It's a bit Blue Man Group for my taste. That, but you know,
is there anything that that you wanted to let everybody know that we haven't talked about yet?
Not really. I know. Really. I haven't really got anything. I mean, there's the remix. There's the remix cassette. It's going to be that's going to be coming out on Romeda. I don't know when, but I'm going to throw an EP on top of that as well. So,
cool.
Which is kind of stuff that finishes off this period. It's stuff that I didn't use in Spirit Animal, and stuff that I've rediscovered that I kind of thought, well, that was good enough to go on Spirit Animal, actually. There's a piece of music that I recorded just after David Bowie died which was called Grief Tourism.
Oh wow!
But there's a few tracks that I did that I'm going to put out, but it's only like 2 or 3 tracks. It's going to be a CDR that comes with this cassette release that Kim's going to do a remix on, and, you know. So and there's some great remixes done already. The guy who did the artwork, Concrete Belly, who did a fantastic job on the artwork for the record. I was so pleased with that because I gave him. I said I want something kind of folk arty. I want something that's looks like a cross between a Pentangle album and a Black Flag record. And he was kind of like, "Oh, you know what I mean?" And I think that's what he came up with. So I was really happy with that.
Yeah.
it's like I wanted it because I kind of, as I was, recording it, I saw it as a folk record, as a, an electronic folk record.
To me, it looked kind of like the doodlings in the notebook of the Goth Teenager, if the Goth Teenager actually existed.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the goth face in there. There's
exactly.
There's the goth, definitely the kind of like miserable looking goth face in there, and the kind of instruments are my instruments in there. There's the kind of
and the hand drawn element to it.
Yeah. Well, I loved what he does. I mean, I've known him. I've known Ash for. Not one of these people that you don't know, but you know. Do you know what I mean? In the modern sense, that you kind of know people that he knows, and you have an online relationship with. And he, I always liked his Concrete Belly music, so I followed him on Instagram, and he was doing these pictures, and I thought these pictures are great. They're wonderful. And I asked him to do something, and then he came up with this, which I love. I love the cover. I think the cover's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what people can do. Because Concrete Bellies is quite Border Canada sounding, and so it just. I think I'm always happier when people remix my stuff. I think I always prefer the remixes to my stuff, because with Cinnamon Fog, the remixes were incredible on that. The Pete Prescription remix. I've known Dorian for years, and I just asked him to do something, and he came up with that, and it kind of blew me away. And the Glitchfield remix, and everything else. It was just I was so happy with that release, because I don't think I was that happy with Cinnamon Fog, if I'm honest. As a piece of music, it was something that I gave to Dave to stick on the Romeda the sampler, and he said, "I want to release this as a single." And I thought, really? What? And then he came up with the idea of doing it on a floppy disk.
I love that. Yeah.
And I just thought, that's incredible. If you can do that, let's do this. And. Yeah. He has got great ideas, because we were having a conversation similar to this about how lo-fi, and how I wasn't, I'm not that willing to embrace new technology, and and he just thought, well, let's get some obsolete technology on this. I thought, let's do that. Why not?
Well, the sound really surprised me. I got that, and it was just completely eye-opening, because I thought I had in my mind a preconceived notion of what it was going to be, going down from, I'm assuming, around 16-bit, regular CD 1644-1 down to 8-bit 1K. And I thought, oh, well, I've played with chiptunes and stuff like that. I know what this is going to sound like. I didn't know what it was going to sound like. It elongated things. It made it, even tracks that didn't have ambient elements, it put a distance to it, and it put an ambient element to it. It was great.
Let me say again that this has been a really an amazing experience to speak with you. 3,000-4,000 miles separated from you, and
I'm sorry you can't see the splendor of the Lickey Hills. You can just see an old garage. This was the only place that I could come to that I thought might be quiet enough to do this. It's very poignant, because you use GarageBand, or as we say here, GarageBand. But so anyway, it's been so much fun spending some time with you. Yeah, I loved it. Thank you.
And I hope we get to meet you again in the future. Especially when you go on to your new project, which is going to be rhythm based, as you tell us. Very much looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
I think we might be a bit grayer and older by the time I finish that.
We all will be.
Good work takes time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, we really enjoyed the chat, Steve. Thank you. Yeah. So let's go out on She Always Explodes. This is Electrocast. We've been talking with Steve, Owlbinos of Northfield. And this is the ultimate track on the album, right? It's the last one. And this is called She Always Explodes. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.